prayer, and then I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll go ahead and get this started.
Let us pray. Lord, thank you for allowing us to be here today and lead, guide, and direct everything that we do, Lord, that would be to your business. In Jesus' name, amen.
Mr. Brewer, I think it's your turn.
Okay, awesome.
Mr. Brewer, I think you can have a seat over here at the table if you want to.
Oh, it doesn't matter, wherever the pleasure of the board is.
I think the microphone right there is on.
Okay, very good. All right, can everybody hear me good enough? And I'll try to speak up. First and foremost, just want to introduce myself. My name is Kyle Brewer, I'm the town manager, town of Surf City, for those of you that I have not had the pleasure of working with. And I've got a few fine folks here with me, or I should say I'm here with them, but our mayor, Teresa Batts, is here with us, followed by Councilwoman Alicia Hawley, and that's the Surf City representation. I'll let Manager Shipley introduce his folks here.
Thanks, Kyle. Doug Shipley, Town Manager for the Town of Topsail Beach. We have our Mayor Frank Braxton with us and Commissioner Tim Zizak. And our Finance Director Connie Foran is not here just yet, but she will be. So, and then of course we have Chris Gibson from TI Coastal. He's an engineer for both towns actually for beach projects. So,
Welcome.
thank you.
And I was going to introduce Chris, but thank you,
Oh,
Doug,
sorry.
on that. We just got a presentation that we wanted to provide, and again, just appreciate the opportunity to come and give a little bit of information on what's happening at the beaches, especially as it pertains to beach nourishment, because there's certainly a lot going on. So we're going to kind of go over, if we can go to the next slide for the outline. We're going to kind of go over just some background and history, and that's what we've asked Chris to be here for. He's been working on the island a lot longer than we have, and has a lot of that institutional knowledge. We're going to go over some of the efforts in which the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission, which is made up of all three towns, Pender County and Onslow County. Commissioner George represents Pender County on that board, and we certainly appreciate his participation in that. I'll go over a little bit of beach nourishment efforts in Surf City. Mr. Shipley will do the same thing in Topsail Beach, and then we'll talk about some collaborative efforts, because there is a few things that we all need to keep our minds on moving into the future and the current climate in which we're working under. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gibson so that he can give you some background and history on what's going on.
Thank you, Kyle. I don't have any slides here, but just wanted to make some talking points about what's gone on over the past years with both Surf City and Topsail Beach. As many of you know, back in the 90s, actually before the 90s, there was a study on Topsail Island by the Corps of Engineers to do a large-scale beach renourishment project. That chief's report was back in 1989. At that time, or it started in 89, I believe the chief's report was in 94. At that time, they narrowed it down to a portion of Topsail Beach, which was the only part that was had the right benefit cost ratio. Unfortunately, Topsail Beach was not in a financial position at the time to sign on to that project. As most of you know, we got whack-a-moled back in 96 to 99 during the birth of Fran, Bonnie, Dennis, Floyd era from 96 to 99. Houses were lost in all three towns on the island during that storm period. And so beach renourishment became a very important topic on the island very quickly after that. In approximately 2007, I believe that's right, the Corps of Engineers restarted studies both for a combined Surf City, North Topsail Beach project, as well as a Topsail Beach project. Those two projects were separate. Um, By 2010, Topsail Beach was in such a state that they needed to go ahead and move forward on their own. The pace of the core studies were not what they should have, what they thought they should be. And so in 2011, we did one of the first projects on the island, which was to dredge portions of Topsail Inlet, as well as two old disposal sites where the Corps placed sand in previously in the construction of the Intercoastal Waterway, and put about 1 million yards of sand on the beach at Topsail Beach. That program morphed as we got the Shallow Draft Navigation Fund authorized in North Carolina. And what that does now is it provides $3 of state money for every dollar of town money that is put into navigation. And originally it was designed specifically for beneficial use on the beaches, but that has, over time, it's mainly a navigation situation, but we do use it for beneficial use and have done so in Topsail Beach now for approximately 6 projects over the last 15 years, totaling about 6 to 7 million yards of sand and $88 million of investment, both by the town. The county has been putting in some, as well as state and federal funds. Federal funds have come through FEMA as restoration of the projects. That has maintained the navigation in Topsail Inlet at a higher level than the Corps previously did. And we have completed projects down there that have now exceeded what the Corps CSDR, the Coastal Storm Damage Reduction Project, would have been. Surf City has been working diligently with the Corps for many years, trying to get a project online there. Unfortunately, Surf City's in the middle of the island, so they don't have an inlet resource. They've got to go offshore. It's a little more expensive. It's a little more problematic. Not problematic is the wrong word, but it's challenging, especially from a cost side. That's a more expensive route to get sand. We joke about with dredging, the 3 things that matter are weather, weather, and weather, because you're paying for the dredge's time even when they're sitting, because they can't harvest. So it's more expensive than working in the back channels, which we've been able to do with Topsail Beach. That study went on through 2010 was when it was first authorized for North Topsail Beach and Surf City together. Unfortunately, North Topsail Beach was not able to meet financial obligations on that as well, and so they backed out of the project and restarted a study. They had to restart the study to make sure the cost-benefit analysis was okay for Surf City alone. They're expecting a chief's report sometime this summer on that, and to be able to move forward hopefully in the next 12 to 24 months on that. But in the interim, post-Florence, there was a lot of dune damage. The town invested with FEMA a little over $10 million to restore the dunes in Surf City. And then this past year, we did something similar to what we had done at Topsail Beach, and was to go into Banks Channel, and we harvested just short of 600,000 yards of sand and nourished the southern part of Surf City from town line just north of the pier in order to protect those areas that were in pretty bad situation. That sand's going to stay in the system and be there when the Corps project comes around, so that will reduce the amount that the Corps will need to move forward with that. It's been an ongoing process for many years on the island. North Topsail Beach, which is in Onslow County, has an ongoing program that they're doing themselves as well. But it has been beneficial to have the county participate at a level, and as a county resident and a waterfront property owner, it's been beneficial to me as well to have this navigation that it's up my personal property value, and to have this ability to get in and out of Topsail Inlet, which, again, folks that have been around know that's a pretty tricky inlet to work out of. So it's been a great program for both towns.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions on sort of the real brief rundown of the history of beach nourishment on the island? And really, what I'm always amazed about is that this is something that really just came about in the 90s, so not that long ago. But we feel like we're at the point where each of the towns on the island have a program that they are operating under and have a long-term plan in place for the benefit of Topsail Island, Surf City, Topsail Beach, Pender County, et cetera. So just gonna skip over the next two real quick. But I think, you know, what Chris was sort of alluding to is that all three towns on the island do have individual projects and plans moving forward. So town of Surf City, you know, again, not a strong history of beach nourishment, except for individual efforts that have been triggered through storm events. As Chris had mentioned, 2010, the original Army Corps Chiefs report was completed, but just because there's a Chiefs report doesn't mean there's funding. Funding for these federal projects has to come through the Water Resources Development Act, or WRDA. We lucked out in very late 2019. There were funds attached to DRA 19 to then finally fund the Surf City project, which we'll get to in a second. A little bit more history. 2012, Surf City Town Council self-implemented a 10-cent tax increase to the ad valorem tax levy within the town, and that was set aside specifically for beach nourishment efforts. So I always speak highly of our current and prior leaders to have that vision to go ahead and start setting aside the money that they knew was going to be necessary to get a project done. Now, did we want a project done a long time ago? Absolutely. However, we are at the point where we are, and we're going to manage this effectively with the resources that we have. So at that point in 2012 was the two-tier funding system of ad valorem tax and accommodations tax transfer to build the Beach Nourishment Fund for the Surf City North Topsail Beach Coastal Storm Risk Management Project, or CSRM. That's that Army Corps terminology for this project. After Florence hit, the town was faced with substantial damage. Again, as Chris had mentioned, there was a dune restoration project that happened utilizing some FEMA reimbursement. In total, that was about a $14 million truck haul project. The reimbursements back to the town were about 11 million, so there's about a $3 million delta in that project. The cost of sand, when you have to truck it from an in-haul source, raises those prices exponentially. But it was something that we had to do. And as Chris had mentioned, Surf City being in the middle of the island, we don't have the ready benefit of utilizing the inlets to pull that sand source. Hydraulically pumping sand for that long of a distance becomes a major challenge. So, again, as mentioned, 2020 awarded the federal funds through DRA 19 to complete the Coastal Storm Risk Management Project. We immediately, that was right when I started with the town, started doing our financial analysis to look at what we had in our Beach Nourishment Fund and what this project cost was going to be. Initial construction, I'll get to some numbers here in a minute, what we had was not going to match up. And I distinctly remember meeting with the mayor then. I told Mayor Medlin, I said, look, you know, we're going to have some bake sales and everything we possibly can to be able to afford this project. And Surf City set its eyes on this federal project a long time ago. They were not going to take their eyes off of that goal. So we were going to do what we had to do to accomplish this project. Fast forward to 2021, and at that point, the project was authorized for Surf City and North Topsail Beach. So that is a key factor in sort of our story here. 2021, after we were a month or two away from signing a project partnership agreement, which is the contractual obligation between the local sponsor, being the town of Surf City and North Topsail Beach, and the Army Corps of Engineers, North Topsail Beach backed out of the project. At that point, we said, okay, well, what does this lead us to? Any sort of Army Corps Civil Works project, once it is amended by more than 20%, they have to go back through what's called the General Reevaluation Report. North Topsail Beach was 4 miles of a 10-mile project, so simple math, 40% of that project was amended overnight by them withdrawing from the project. So we have, since that time, have been working through the general reevaluation report, essentially to get to the end same result, to show that the project is environmentally constructible, economically justified, and that there is a benefit cost ratio back to the taxpayer that says money that we're going to spend on the federal dollar side is justified because there is a return on it. They are looking for anything over a 1-to-1 ratio with this. Surf City's project, even with North Topsail Beach, removing itself from that is like a 1-to-3. So we are still in the positive with it, which has made this a favorable project for us to move forward. When we get to the point of initial construction, this will be the largest beach nourishment project on the East Coast. I mean, it's a huge project and a lot of change that's coming to Surf City. When I started mentioning things like bake sales, the discussion of paid parking came into play in 2021. Town leaders had fought paid parking for years and years and years, even though that was an enticing action to take, and some of our neighbors down south had already implemented paid parking programs. Excuse me. But we knew that this was, really the only other revenue source that we could initiate to start bringing in the monies that we needed to be able to do this project. So I kind of jumped ahead. But with those efforts, Mayor Batts going to DC to testify in front of subcommittee meetings, we were moving forward and completing these projects. 2025, this year, as Chris had mentioned, we were able to look at what we called our intermediate project because we didn't know the specific timing of the Corps. We had a window of opportunity to take advantage of state funding through that shallow draft navigation fund at that 3-to-1 ratio that was mentioned, and just finished up at the very end of April, getting everything off of the beach and placing 585,000 cubic yards of sand on the beaches of Surf City from the Topsail Beach town line to about 1,000 feet north of the pier. So again, 6 miles of Surf City, we're still void that portion north of the pier up to our northern property line where it meets North Topsail Beach. So that project was about in total about 18 million. Surf City's contribution being about 4 million of that project. We're working through state reimbursements right now, but that's all out of pocket, and then we have to wait for those monies to come back. But again, as I mentioned, building this beach nourishment fund with the resources that we have, being able to complete projects for the benefit of everybody for it. So with the core project, we are anticipating initial construction to begin in December of this year. That's going to be a year-round dredging project, which means that they're going to be pumping sand for 16 months straight. And that's going to be dependent on the 3 Ws that Chris had mentioned, weather, and weather, but utilizing offshore borrow sites for initial construction, and then a 50-year renourishment program. So the benefit of being within the Army Corps projects is that we have a renourishment schedule now every 6 years, where they'll come back in and put the template back to as close to as what they can to the original construction. That's a 50-50 split, and I'll get into some of the funding here in just a little bit. The next slide shows just a template of what we can expect to see with that project. So with the dotted line, that's showing our existing slope on the dune. And if you've been to Surf City beaches before this shallow draft project, you'll know, I mean, at high tide, we're up against the dune. It's a serious situation. That template, again, more than 6 million cubic yards of sand being placed on the beach to build a new dune in front of our current dune structure, plus then the berm and dry sand recreational beach that will go out to the ocean, providing those storm protections, recreational benefits, economic benefits, etc. So the funding scenario in which we currently operate on is a three-tiered system. And again, as I noted before, 10 cents of the ad valorem property tax. So right now, 1 penny generates pretty close to about $200,000. So, you know, about 2 million of the ad valorem goes into that beach nourishment fund. The accommodations direct transfer, so that 3% goes directly into the beach nourishment fund, and then paid parking net revenues. So this is about the most transparent funding process that you know, you'll find in government, is that those three legs are going directly into beach nourishment year over year. And that's something that we can look at, project out into the future to understand what our debt capacity is going to look like year over year, and what we're going to need to put away to be able to afford to keep our beaches in good shape. So the parking revenue is about net revenue. It's about a little less than $1 million annually. It's all dependent on weather and people visiting the beach. But again, those monies are not going towards anything else within the town of Surf City except for beach nourishment and maintaining that parking program. So once in a while, we might have to put gravel out in a parking lot, buy new parking bumpers, buy a new golf cart for enforcement, et cetera. So just wanted to kind of go over that. The Coastal Storm Risk Management, or the Army Corps project, is set up to where there's a 65% federal cost share with this project. The remaining 35% is on the local jurisdiction. Here in the great state of North Carolina, they cover half of that local participant cost, or it's 17.5%. So what that looks like with a potential $187 million initial construction project is Surf City's liability still being over $32 million just for the initial construction of this project. That's not the total cost of the project. That's just Surf City's obligation to fulfill 17.5% of that total dollar number. Periodic nourishment's estimated at $317 million over the next 50 years. Again, every 6 years for renourishment, and then we may qualify for funding in the intermittent if there's a named storm. Comes under a different pot of money in the federal government, FCCE money, or coastal erosion control. But essentially, this is the project and the program in which we will be operating under. So again, that's what the funding situation will look like, being that 17.5%, or approximately $32 million coming December. The town will work on a pay-as-you-go type of situation over that next 16 months when they're doing construction, so we can anticipate that, and we will see doing year-round dredging, no stopping during the summer. There's going to be impacts to short-term rentals. There's going to be impacts to the local economy, but we do feel very strongly, and it's supported on the federal and state government side, that there's the loss of habitat and the loss of storm protection. It's worth it for them to issue the approvals. Something that we have to work very closely with our partners, like at the Sea Turtle Hospital, to make sure that I'm never going to get their full support, but they at least understand when they have to relocate a sea turtle nest, because there's no habitat and it's just going to be washed away with the tide. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Doug to talk about Topsail Beach specific.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. Chris actually kind of mentioned a variety of the things that I was going to discuss in our presentation, but that's okay. So the town of Topsail Beach, back in 2011, we implemented our own 30-year beach management plan and did our first project back then at about 1 million cubic yards. As you can see, it cost us a little over $8 million. And you can see the split between local and state. And then we had Irene and Matthew and Florence. Obviously, the kickers there were Matthew and Florence. Well, Florence specifically. We had multiple phases on that. We also introduced paid parking in our south end, and currently, the south end parking lot has 27 parking spaces, and currently, the funds that come from that go back into our beach inlet and sound fund. That is up for discussion, though, in our budget workshop that we have on Wednesday. We also have recently added paid parking at a few of our beachfront accesses. Not all of them, but a few of them. The one key point that I wanted to point out here is the Hurricane Isaias. That particular project, as you can see, cost us about 25 million bucks. We ended up losing about $4 million in that as far as reimbursement is concerned. We were expected, and I need you all to correct me on this, but we were expecting $5.6 million in return on that, but only ended up with $1.6 million. And we had to actually go into arbitration. We actually appealed twice. Twice?
Yes.
We appealed twice on that and lost our appeals. So then we went into arbitration, and we also lost the arbitration. So we currently are at 6.75 cents ad valorem to our BIS, and in our budget projections for this coming fiscal year, we're gonna have to go back up to 10 cents. And then we'll have to add some additional next year as well in order to try to make it back to where we need to be for our next project. So our cycle is about every 4 to 5 years. And then, Mr. Gibson has expressed that he feels as though we need to have about $12 million in the bank in order to fund that project. Keep in mind, we just did a project a little over a year ago. It was about $26 million, give or take. Our share was about $6.5 to $7 million. Again, the shallow draft inlet, 3-to-1 matching. But in order to account for inflation and cost and things of that nature, we're looking at having to have about $10.5 to $12 million for our next project in about 3 years. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, and part of that, it has to deal, we can talk about this later, part of it has to deal with cash flow, because all of these are reimbursable grants.
Correct.
So when you're doing a $24 million project in 60 days, you've got $10, $12 million going out a month. You've got to be able to cash flow that in order, and then expect the monies to come back from the state in 60 to 90 days. So there's a huge outlay for the towns to do these projects. You have to be ahead of the game rather than behind it.
And the funds don't always return in 60 to 90 days. So, and then the bills are due with the dredging company. Luckily, we've had some good partners with the most recent dredging company, and so we've been able to make that work. But right now, our fund stands at about $5.6 million in our beach inlet and sound. We are waiting on about $350 or so thousand coming back from the state's portion of the Isaias that should get us to close to about $6 million. All right. So we still have about another $5 to $6 million that we have to get to in the next 3 years in order to fund our next project. All right. So again, I mentioned already 6.75 cents is our current rate. We are projecting to go to 10 cents. It has not been approved yet. Again, we've already talked about the accommodations tax that comes our way, 3% through resolution with the county, and so that goes straight into our beach inlet and sound. And again, currently our south end parking lot revenues, which nets us $40,000 to $50,000 a year net. That's about all that goes into back into our BIS. So did you want to go ahead and touch on this?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, even though we're on an island, we don't work independently. I think that we've done a good job over the last 20 years plus, 30 years really, of having some sort of unity as an island. We can't do all this stuff alone, and the efforts of the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission, which are elected members sit, and then there's some appointments according to the bylaws, have really come together, even though projects have not come to fruition where all 3 towns are doing the same project. the commitment to the beach and the environment in which we have to navigate lends us to additional projects that we have to undertake. Some examples of that: providing education to our visitors on not digging holes and not leaving your trash behind. We got to make sure that people want to come back to Pender County and Topsail Island for their vacation. A highly competitive market and vacations. So we want to make sure our best foot is forward, but that's just one really small project. The TISPC actively engages dialogue in regard to legislation that is necessary or legislation that's challenging some of the things that we're trying to do. Abandoned and derelict vessels is one of those things. When somebody leaves their boat out in the waterway, sometimes it's up to local government to figure out a solution with it. So having some partnerships with folks like the Coastal Federation and legislature to fund some of these programs has taken somewhat of a burden off of our shoulders, which we're very appreciative of. And then what our most recent project is a beach Vitex project. And back in the 90s, the island had done a project with this, but it didn't go away. Beach Vitex is a invasive species, so think of like a kudzu or something of that nature. If you don't address it, it's going to take over the dunes, and it's a thick woody vine that will just completely degrade the character and the structure of that dune system. So all three towns, again, went together, applied for a grant through the Coastal Storm Damage Mitigation Fund, were awarded a grant at a $1-to-1 cost share, and we'll be starting this project in May for all three towns with a single contractor to be able to move forward. Future beach nourishment projects, if you don't maintain what you have now, you're only going to have additional problems in the future. So first round of grant funding, $690,000. Thankfully, our bids that came in for this project were less than that, but it's just another project that we'll be moving forward collectively to continue. The last slide that I had was just talking about collaborative efforts, and I think that this opportunity to discuss what's going on over at the in the beach communities isn't just a very small little snippet of some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the challenges that you all are going to be facing in our current economic climate and across the nation is things that we're keeping an eye on is loss of federal funding. Certain things that were being funded in the past, we may not be able to count on those, even though they may seem steadfast programs and are good for the community. Sometimes they get swept up in other discussions. So very concerned about loss of funding at the core level, not for our initial project, but each renourishment every 6 years has to be authorized through WRDA, even though we have a fantastic representative up there and Congressman Rouser, who is in a leadership role, and we have a good relationship with him. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, so we got to be cognizant of that and think ahead as far as what our partnerships look like. We heard last week at the North Carolina Beach Inlet Waterway Association some of the things that you all have probably been hearing about FEMA and how the federal government is looking to cut FEMA way back. We don't know what that's going to look like. Some of it we are fully supportive. We think that there's efficiencies, understanding how those things work that we can find in FEMA. But the message that we had gotten last Friday was that there's a potential evaluation on not funding what they would call Category G in public assistance. Well, Category G is going to be beach renourishment after an event. So for projects that rely on some of those FEMA funds and claims that go in, if that claim cannot be answered, that's going to be a major issue. That's like going from insured at your house to not insured anymore overnight, and that next storm is going to have an impact. Other issues that we were in DC last month talking about, the policy changes that go back and forth based on leadership in Washington DC. Sand removal within the inlets or Cobra zones and taking that sand outside of the Cobra zone. One administration will let you do it, the next one that comes in will not. So trying to get some things into law to help give us some predictability for that re-nourishment process. As Chris can talk to it much more eloquently than I can. What we put in on the beach ends up in the inlet. And then from the inlet, we put it back on the beach. It's a cyclical process. So when the federal government says you cannot take that sand that you just put on the beach out of the inlet to put back on that beach, we're going to clog up our waterways. It's going to require additional funding, additional efforts, that we're not going to have this beneficial reuse of sand material, and there's no real disposal sites that you can take this resource. And you know, sand, you start looking at it in a different way. It's not an annoyance, you know, being stuck to your feet. This is a true resource that we all rely on to make sure that these protections are in place, economic engines continue to move forward. So I guess the only thing I can say before we conclude in the presentation is, you know, we appreciate the opportunity to work together. We're going to need to, in my opinion, we need to continue to work more closely than we have as far as the county and the towns, and we certainly look forward to that. So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that's a 30,000 foot level overview of what's happening in regards to the beaches in Surf City and Topsail Beach.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any questions for Mr. Brewer or Mr. Shipley? I got just a couple. You both mentioned that 3% of the accommodations goes
Yes,
back.
sir.
Where does the other 3 go now? You getting that?
Yeah, so for Surf City, and we do it a little bit differently in both towns. So we collect as accommodations tax. We do direct transfer into Beach Nourishment Fund,
Okay.
whereas theirs are going directly into the BIS fund. Things like crossover maintenance, like boardwalks that we have to maintain for access to the beach.
Okay.
We maintain the welcome center on the island. Other programs that we are operating, we do have, well, up until 2 months ago, we had a special events staff person. We no longer have that within the town. Part-time staff that are running some of those events. Things like some of the 3rd of July stuff, Christmas tree lighting, trying to bring people to the island and make sure that we can accommodate that is generally where the remainder of those funds are gone.
Okay.
I think the question was about, because the 6% that comes in on the
Yeah.
MAPC, you guys both put all of that back into your beach fund. So the 3% you keep, y'all put into your beach fund, and the 3% the county sends back,
Yes.
y'all put into the beach fund as well.
No.
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 Yes, for us.
Yes, for Topsail Beach. What I'm saying is that there's a direct transfer of the 3% that goes into.
So what you're saying basically is you take some of that to maintain crossovers
right.
and
That's right. That's
stuff
correct.
related to the beach.
That's correct.
I got
Yes,
you.
sir.
But
Yeah.
even though we put it into our BIS fund, we also take those funds and use it to repair the crossovers and
Yeah.
things the same way.
I'm
We
with you.
just have one fund where they have, I think you have two different
Yeah.
funds.
All right.
Beach Nourishment Fund, Accommodations Tax Fund. And we're
Well,
doing direct transfers.
thank goodness you got the additional 3.
100%.
It just happened, what, last year, I think, right?
Oh, no, the agreement has been
Last
in
year?
place for several years.
Well-
So the additional 3 that you're referring to is
Oh,
in the
this-
rest of the county.
I'm with you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll
Yeah.
They
call it.
always got
Some additional
6%.
legislation.
I'm with
that- Yeah.
Okay. And the Vitex really takes away with that root, it really
Oh,
takes
yeah.
away from the
It's
sand?
horrid.
Really?
Yes.
It is. So the, I'm sorry.
No, please
I
do.
want to put some details
So I
on
would
this.
say,
Yeah.
where would
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
where would
So-
it differ
so-
from COs?
Extremely.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
what
Take over
happens,
the COs.
what happens with beach vitex, it's a shallow root,
Yep.
but it also emits a pheromone that kills everything else that's underneath it. And because it's a shallow root, it does no protection for the dunes as far as
Okay.
keeping them together. Whereas when you plant a CO and it collects sand and it grows up, that whole root system where you planted it, it grows all the way up as the dune grows. So in places you have a root mat that may be 6 or 8 feet thick on a
Wow.
sea oat,
Yep.
whereas on the Vitex it's about this deep. So
I'm
it's,
with you.
it's just runners right under the surface. And again, it kills everything else because it emits this chemical.
Hmm.
So, and other wildlife doesn't like it either. The birds
Yeah.
and turtles can't dig through it.
Hmm.
It really messes up the whole ecological system in North Carolina.
If you could ever if Bahia would ever grow there, you'd have it made, because that stuff, I
That's
hate
right.
that the state ever introduced that here.
Yes, and actually, they did just start allowing governments to use straw hay bales for sand fencing, which is new.
And my biggest question would probably be to Mr. Gibson. I hardly ever see the sand wash away on the beach around Wrightsville Beach's jetty. What is the problem with putting jetties in our inlets?
So that's a big question, and
Yeah,
that's a
but
political.
it just requires some common sense answer.
There are.
I mean, it's,
It goes.
and I think you're gonna agree with me.
Yes. Systems like Wrightsville Beach, especially where they have a weir that allows the sand to drop over into the inlet where they
Mhm.
can dredge it safely and put it and recycle it, which is
Mhm.
what Wrightsville Beach does. What's amazing, if you go back to '83, that you don't realize this, but that jetty at Wrightsville Beach, if you look on Google Earth, you'll see a rock pile all the way back on the backside by the Coast Guard station.
I was there then.
Okay, so it was put in, it went all the way across. It was that went in '83, and I think '88 the South Jetty went in, or '87. And what was interesting about that is the inlet reversed direction that it was migrating when they put in the one, and it put this weird hook that was on the outside. You had to run parallel to Masonboro to get out.
Yeah.
So they put in the South Jetty for the navigation purposes. They have had over the years, one of the problems and the reason politically North Carolina doesn't care for jetties is because for years they've had to take half the sand they dredge out of Masonboro Inlet and send it down to Masonboro to keep that island from breaking through in the middle. So there's a huge cost that goes along. 50% of the cost down there has been to send sand downdrift. So if you're asking me, do I think terminal groins and those kind of things are useful? Absolutely. I am a proponent of what they're trying to do at North Topsail Beach. I think we've got a good natural system going at Topsail, because you're still gonna have to do this recycling that we do. We've just put, the North Carolina Land Trust just put the point into preservation, that 100 acres down there.
Yeah.
So there's not gonna be development down there, to where you've gotta really shore up and protect right there in an immediate location.
I mean, Topsail's good after you dredge it, but in a couple of months, and then we're having to take the cans out of the equation, and I have to navigate, because I navigated a lot.
I think Topsail, with what we can politically do in this state, because you can't put jetties in. Even though they've got some terminal
Yeah.
structures that help with the beach stuff, jetties are still a big no-no, and
Yeah.
the cost of putting them in, you're talking about $100 million to put in jetties around Topsail Beach. It's just, it's not as
You
feasible.
said that key word a couple times, politically, so there you go.
Well, the whole
Yeah.
thing with the terminal groins, and the jetties, when I was in college, they were doing all of the work on putting jetties in Oregon Inlet. And Bass Night eventually was the one from up there that said, I'm tired of talking about this, just can the jetties. And
Yeah.
that's.
And several lives have been lost since then too, up there.
Yeah.
So. But I appreciate it. Thank y'all for your time. Any
Yes,
other
sir.
questions for these gentlemen?
Y'all not asking for anything today, additionally?
I mean, if you're off, we can always ask. I feel like my board would probably be upset if I didn't ask for something, but,
It's in there.
Madam Mayor, I think.
It's in there.
No, I think just the opportunity to have the conversation is certainly one we appreciate.
Well, we certainly agree with everything you've said, and I know I've had a conversation with the mayor in the past, and we want to work toward, our board, we want to work toward having a more collaborative effort
Yes,
with
sir.
Surf City and Topsail, because we all serve the same citizens
Yes, sir.
in the whole county.
Yes, sir.
And our citizens here on the west, they enjoy the east also.
Yeah,
And we
Yeah.
want to make sure we collaborate together.
sure. No, I knew the paid parking stuff was a tough pill to swallow, because, we get all the data from that, and how many people that are close by that utilize Surf City beaches You know, but the other side of it is that we can clearly say that this goes directly into beach nourishment,
Yeah.
which I think is certainly a good
I
thing.
think if you communicate that with folks, it goes over a little better with them, knowing that
Little
they're
bit.
gonna enjoy the beach that
Sure.
they're helping to pay for.
Absolutely, and they'll see those benefits. I think they saw it a little bit, and I don't mean to belabor our conversation today, but when the core project comes through, even with the Banks Channel project, I was 2 weekends ago, Saturday morning, my son and I were leaving the beach, and 2 girls were coming across, and you know, the layperson doesn't know really exactly what's going on, and they kind of did a double take and said, something is different here. So they start to recognize and realize it, and you know, we certainly want to make sure that those investments are made for our business people and our residents, and
And we just
everybody.
pray there's no big storms this year.
Yes, for
Mr.
sure.
Brewer, when is the agreement you were talking about earlier, when does it expire?
Which agreement, Commissioner?
I think it was the accommodations or,
I don't know if there's an expiration date on
Okay.
the agreement.
It's been in
Okay.
place since 2001.
Yeah, it's not, it's no longer an agreement, it's legislation.
okay, all right.
It started as an agreement and then it was adopted, and it's been changed a couple of times.
Yeah.
I did some research on it, but I don't know exactly when the last time it was changed, but it's been law since the nineties, I do
Yeah.
believe, or almost the end of the nineties.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And we always
appreciate you.
extend the invitation for anything you guys want to do over there. Almost
Absolutely.
anything.
Good to see y'all.
And you have a digital copy of the presentation.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Yes, sir.
As you all know, Mr. Nutt was our assistant manager, Cal was our planning board director for many years. How many years, Cal?
Planning director for 10 years, worked with the county for 12, and still currently serve on the Board of Adjustment. So Commissioner
Okay.
George's seat is always a comfortable one when I come in on Wednesday mornings for that, so.
Well, I hate to say it since the mayor's in here, but we have an opening for a county manager, so.
Yeah.
How long you with us, Doug?
Yeah, I don't know, Doug.
I
is
was
up
here
to
for
you.
almost 5 years, and that was my seat right there.
Okay, we have an open seat, so, but, good to
Thank
see you guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
See y'all.
Have a good afternoon.
All right. All right, Madam Manager?
Yes, so now we are going to go maybe back through some of the things that we need a little bit of clarity on.
Sure.
And then we will get to sharpening our pencils and balance it all out and bring it back to you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, housing. They were supposed to go the other day and Brianna
Yeah.
had to leave for an emergency.
Yep.
So we're gonna do housing first real quick, and
Okay.
then we're gonna do what I just said.
All right. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
He's trying to get it back up there for you. There you go.
Bree is not requesting any enhancements. She is now the new housing director, so we work together on this budget. There's a small increase for contract services just due to the software system that they use, but other than that, maintaining their level. So I'll turn it over to you, Bree.
What tab are you on?
Oh,
48.
48.
All right.
And to clarify before we get started, housing is an enterprise fund.
Okay.
In that the revenues from the housing program come in and we pay them out of the same fund for landlord rental payments. However, there is a transfer from the general fund that is our cost to run the programs. They do give us some admin fee money, and we get admin fee money from Seven Oaks, but just to be clear, there is a general fund contribution for, mostly for salaries.
The only major change that you gentlemen will see tonight will be that we are requesting an extra $7,200 for our budget because my predecessor, Sue Sava, the old director, she was also our Inspire certified inspector, and we will need to pace a third-party inspector to conduct inspections of all of our units. We are not allowed to conduct our own. The only reason that she was allowed to was because she was Inspire certified before she ever became director here. You're not allowed to inspect your own properties. We could have Wilmington Housing do it, we could have Duplin County, we could have Brunswick County, but it is quite a nightmare to ask any of them to step outside of their own to do ours. They're very busy as well. I've sent out 3 different bids, and I came out to a median amount, which was $7,200 for us to be able to complete all 160 of our units.
And I will say the contribution from general fund, you can see in the bottom total category, it goes down about a little bit less than 10,000 from
Yes.
last year.
So it goes down, so you're saying that 7 additional she's asking for a wash, what about 3 left?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, no, that includes the 7.
okay,
Yeah, so
Oh.
it's
Mhm.
really more like
Okay.
17.
good.
And that's it. That's all.
Any questions? Thank you. That
Thank you
was
guys so much.
short and sweet.
Yes.
How many apartments you got open?
I'm sorry.
How many apartments are open?
For Seven Oaks, 9 right now.
When you gonna open those back up?
I am expecting and hoping within the next 6 months to be fully leased up. Yes, sir.
Get it on the market.
Any other? Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Get it
Thank
on the
you.
market.
Go ahead. Yeah, go over that. And then I'll go over the questions that you had.
All right. Uh-oh. Oh, Lord. Additional. Oh, this is your, went back to the drawing board paperwork. Okay. Ah, okay.
All right, so this is what we like to call, I know it's small font, so we can talk about or have any questions. Basically, this is a summary. This is a summary of what you have seen the last 4 meetings. It is all of what we call enhancements, and so if you flip through, the first 2 pages are all of the enhancements related to positions. Yes, I'm sorry. Trying to talk into it. The first 2 pages are a summary of all of the enhancements related to positions. So the reclasses, we have a total of, I think, 30. It's 23 reclasses, and then it's within each reclass, there's numerous positions. 2 new positions added to this budget, as well as just a multiple, I think there's 4 career related. We've talked about career development plans several times here. Those are career development related that we're doing during budget time. In the vehicle section, you can see the 2 inspections vehicle replacements that we talked about on last Thursday, the 2 DSS vehicles that we talked about. That was the first meeting at the end of April. And then we have the 20 replacement sheriff vehicles in there as well, with, on the left side, just a summary of when you do 20 sheriff's vehicles, that comes with equipment and registration and radios that is summarized there under the column A in the sheriff's section, as well as just some enhancements that we've already discussed through the various presentations in contracted services. So that's just a summary of the enhancements, and I'm not sure how we want to proceed from here, but it's kind of just for your viewing pleasure there.
Yeah, so this is narrowed down to what did make it into this budget.
Okay.
The list of what was requested is much longer. But what we did do is go back through some of the feedback that you all had given us. We went through some of the feedback that you all had given us and looked at certain departments and positions that you had mentioned, that the departments mentioned when they were in here. And I'm just gonna go through them, and if you have questions, please stop me. The first one being the inspections director position. The inspections director position is graded at a 15. And.
Where you
and
at, Meg?
You're
I'm
not,
sorry.
well, you're not gonna see this on
Oh,
here
okay.
because this has existed since before.
Okay.
I do have some information that I can share. Can you pass these out? Just pull it up. You drive. And see if you can't just pull it up. No, okay. You pass those out. Alright, so the inspections director position is graded at a 15. I believe that, I won't pretend to know exactly how that transpired, but at one point it was because it was under planning that's how it was graded. So since we have now split them out officially, we are suggesting to grade that the same as the planning director, which is a grade 18. And that way it will solve the problem of the senior planner and the the senior inspector and the inspections director salary compression. We also compared it to other counties, and the grade 18 matches much more closely to what those other counties are offering as far as a range. Although we're not starting them at 0. We're giving the credit for the years of service, or the experience. So next we have Register of Deeds. We went back and looked at the Register of Deeds. Maybe help her just go ahead and pass all these out while you're doing it. Hold on to this one. You can pass those out. One of those. Alright, so the Register of Deeds, HR and our Register of Deeds collaborated on what counties to look at and who to compare to, and what we found actually is that those positions appear to be graded correctly. The problem is the folks that are in those positions have been here for a while in most cases, and they had not gotten credit for those years of service. So what we're gonna do is, instead of regrading the positions themselves, we're going to adjust the steps accordingly for those folks who have been here a long time and essentially not gotten acknowledgement for their years of service.
How did that happen? I mean, how does that happen?
Because we didn't used to have the grade and step system, and there are some people who, came to the table. A lot of it was addressing those, kind of like we discussed. There was a lot of addressing the hard to fill and turnover positions, and unfortunately, doing that in the past has not helped those folks who stayed here
Okay.
very well. So we are making that right. The next is custodians. We looked at the custodial staff, and we believe that regrading them from a 2 to a 3 makes sense. It makes sense with comparative salaries in the area. I don't know off the top of my head who exactly we looked at about 10 counties for that. And I would say that we're probably on the low end of the average, although we're not the lowest. But we definitely see the value in adding that. And you can see here that totals $29,000 over in the yellow. Sorry, my voice is going away. Next we looked at the jail cooks, because they're in a similar situation as the custodians. They are also graded a 2. They work 12-hour shifts. There are not a lot of them, so they all work a lot of shifts and very hard. Not that, it's subjective, right? But we wanted to make sure that we looked at those as well, since we were looking at the custodial. And we also think that those should be regraded to a 3.
Are they cooking in the jail now? Because I know that one time it was being brought in by the state, right?
So they buy a
DOC?
lot of their products from the state. During COVID, the prison did provide meals because
Okay.
they were like a prepackaged kind of situation.
Yeah.
It was very expensive and very
So we're
logistically
back to
challenging.
cooking. Okay.
Yes, so once the COVID precautions were kind of,
Yeah.
we went back to what was working for us. We do buy a lot of our meats and stuff from the state prison system because they have really large contracts that they work with. So that works to our advantage for sure. But we are cooking. They are cooking in
Okay.
jail. Yes. And then what is next? Okay, next is the sheriff's office, and can we pass these out? This one is a little more complicated. It's the most concise way I can say that. So initially the conversation started talking about road deputies. Well, the road deputies are just one classification of the deputies, and they're all graded the same. And so if you change the road deputies, it throws it off to where you're almost gonna be creating yourself a whole nother set of challenges if one set of deputies is paid more than the others. Because they're all gonna wanna be road deputies, or you're gonna have vacancies in the others and you can't fulfill those duties instead of being able to assign them as you need them. So you can see here, there's 3 different pages in each section. The first is if you were just looking at road deputies. That is there's 2 options there. One is if you just change the people at the deputy sheriff 1 level. The option 2 is if you adjust the people above them that would need to move to avoid the compression. Then the next page is if you include the court system and jail transport folks that are also graded at a 7, and you regrade them to a 9. You can see those dollar amounts. Again, option 1 and option 2, if you were to just move the deputies, or if you moved everybody above them so that you avoid compression. And then the last page is SROs. If you were to regrade them as well, it will be an additional. So for option 1, we're looking at about 550,000. For option 2, we're looking at closer to 6, maybe 6.5, or 650. To make those adjustments. That is a lot of money. It is a lot of money in a budget that we're struggling to balance already. We certainly want to support our sheriff's office. We have done a lot in the way of adjusting these salaries in the last several years. Right, well, they're also getting a COLA just like everyone else. But, in order to make it effective, we had to do a little math behind the scenes. So our question to you all is, how do you want to approach this part?
I got a question, Ms. Blue.
Yes.
I'm sitting here actively looking at the public engagement feedback summary. One of the things on there, the top thing was support schools and education. The next thing was enhancing public safety.
Yes, sir.
So I would ask before I give my opinion, what kind of questions were on the enhanced public safety, and how does the citizens want us to improve that?
Okay, twofold. We can answer the question. Do you have a question, Tammy, for the strategic questions?
So the public was not asked specific questions for each one of those goals. They were given a general definition of what, enhancing public safety would be, or supporting schools. The specifics of that will be when we set up the work groups to actually set the objectives and benchmarks. There are no specifics for those right now.
I just read a couple of comments were feeling safe in their county and more presence of law enforcement. What was it? I can't remember. There was a summary on the thing today.
Yes, there was, I didn't bring it with me because I didn't know we were gonna talk about it. But yes, a lot of people wanted more, law enforcement presence because they're, you know, they don't see that much law enforcement around because we're such a large county. And that they wanna feel safe in their communities.
Thank you, Ms. Blue.
And then as far as how they want us to address it, again, I think that's part of the strategic planning development process that we'll get to, but we're not quite there yet as far as the specific ways to address it. Obviously, retention of deputies is step number one, right? How do you protect people if you can't keep deputies? So, like I said, we certainly understand where you're coming from. We have made some adjustments in the past few years. Sarah worked really hard with the sheriff's office on that, and they've been very appreciative of that. But as far as how you want to proceed with implementing this or not,
So
that's kind of where we're looking for direction.
Part of Friday, I spent with a New Haven County commissioner, and their budget increases their deputy pay because they're losing people to us. So they're
Right.
they're bringing theirs up to, their plan is to bring it up equal or greater than Onslow County.
And that's 56 starting, basically.
So
Which is what this would do. And, I mean.
So let me just throw this at you. So if we were to do this, these enhancements, say option 3, that will increase the reoccurring cost 600,000.
Yes.
Can that be done without a tax hike?
I would say I can do some pencil sharpening and tell you that answer.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, anything can be done. Doesn't mean that we don't have to cut somewhere else to figure it out.
Well,
how much of the projected budget is going to the general fund or the reserve this year?
You mean for
fund
debt
balance.
service?
Yeah, no, for the fund balance.
Well, we don't project anything to go to debt, to fund balance. If anything, we projected to go to the debt service fund to save for debt service in the future.
for the capital
Yeah,
projects,
we
right?
don't project an income.
Okay.
Well, how much is projected to go to? I mean, because we built that fund up over the past 5 years, but at one time.
Yeah, so it inherently grows because we got more revenues than we anticipated or spent less than what we anticipated, right? And that would be how it grows. But like I said, you know, we balance to 0 or else our tax rate is too high, in theory. But, so as far as what we project as income, the answer is nothing. But what we're transferring to the debt service fund is millions of dollars, based on the Davenport presentation that we received. And that will keep up with our need for future debt service.
But then there's another side of it that is saved to keep our bond rating, right? At the
Correct.
minimum?
Correct.
And that's not touched, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Unless we come to you all and pull something out of it for a specific project.
One-time deal, yeah,
That stays there.
I'm with you.
You're correct.
Okay. Well, I think, just me, these folks deserve a good look if we can sharpen up and take care of them. I'd much rather our employees form roots here in this county and have a career and not just a job so they can find something else. I mean, I don't know y'all's thoughts on that, but I would want them to have a career here.
Sure. So I would say what this does, based on the information we were given, is it moves them from a 7 to a 9. We can see what it would look like at an 8.
Okay.
And to kind of bite the apple one piece at a time. Again, though, if New Hanover County is making that move, you know, it's a game. That's why salary
Yeah.
studies are irrelevant as soon as they're done.
Sure.
Because they take so long to do, and by the time you're done with it, somebody else is doing one because
Mhm.
you're taking their people.
Well, let's see where they're at an 8 and a 9, and y'all let us know
Yeah.
out there.
I just wanted you all to see how much it was going to cost
Oh, we knew
to
that.
do something like that.
We knew that.
So it is a lot.
At an 8, it would be about half of what it is, because
Half of the difference.
half
yeah.
of the difference.
Should be a little of
'Cause if we're
300 and
doing
some
two
thousand.
steps,
Mhm.
Now doing one.
But it would be giving everybody a couple of steps at least.
It would give them a grade. They would stay on their step, but we're gonna give them a step for being employed.
But it would go with different pay grade, and the COLA would on
Correct.
top of that. I
That's
think
right.
that's a good.
So
move
what
toward
I would add,
helping folks.
Ms. Blue, if the board, and I decided we wanted to move forward with this, can we put conditions on the sheriff, or the new employees, such as they're gonna be radar certified, get their intoxilizer schools and all that kind of stuff? Can you earmark this stuff
I
for
can
that to
find
happen?
out
Okay.
about that as far as the requirements to be a deputy.
Okay.
I would think that the only way you could implement that would be to make it part of the job description as a required certification. But I can look into that with HR and
Let us,
the
how
sheriff's
about
office
this,
and Trey.
just another idea.
Okay, thank you.
I see some of their command staff from like lieutenant and above looks in pretty good shape. So how about let us look at it from like below lieutenant?
Well, it does. It doesn't, neither of these address captains or the chief deputy.
Or the lieutenants, or the captains, yeah. Let's look at sergeant and below, how about that?
Okay,
Because I think at lieutenant and above, I think they're pretty in line with other counties.
sure.
Is that good with you? That are
Yeah,
just
'cause that's not
sergeant
what we
and
asked
below.
for.
Sergeant and below,
Yeah,
like
that's what
lieutenant
we
and
said.
above command staff, I think they're pretty much in line.
We asked for the deputies, the new deputies that were coming in.
Yes, you did. It creates a compression with the people right above them, but what you're saying is we've used it all the way up to lieutenant. You want to stop before lieutenant.
Let's look at sergeant and below.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The other things we need some clarification on are the outside agencies. We know we had talked about them.
This sheet here.
Yes.
So I know during the presentation, I know that our fire marshal was probably behind, but an $18,000 increase is a little steep. And that's just my thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the sheet I was talking about. I thought you held up the outside agencies.
I'm talking about the first sheet that I was given
Oh,
tonight
sure.
for the enhancements.
Yeah.
The number 20 down there, the fire marshal. I mean, I understand she's behind a little bit, but I think an $18,000 increase is a pretty significant jump.
Okay.
We can look at that.
Please.
And that was just bringing her up to.
Yeah, I looked at,
correct the
I think she had done
grade or whatever
some
itself.
salary study, but we can,
yeah, I looked at the median age the other day, just a couple of places, and the median fire marshal's salary in North Carolina right now is around $71,000 to $72,000 a year. So
We will get
I say
those
just look at it and see.
She was trying to put herself up equal to emergency management. And HR was told that that was going to happen. So,
Mm.
We'll do some math and come back to it.
Yeah, I think that deserves a little more conversation.
Sure.
I think also, since we're on this page, is there something you want to say, Ms. Blue?
I was just, we can go through the salaries too. I was referring to the outside agencies
Oh.
with, like the Trillium, the beaches.
That's in our book, right?
The
It's in the back, yeah.
nonprofits that provide programming in the county. But if you wanna, if we're still talking about salaries, that's perfectly fine.
What tab is it?
41.
Jacob, can you tell us, which ones are gonna be mandated for us to pay?
So on this sheet that you see before you, I've sort of separated them based on, I would say, contractual agreement and state law and various other agreements. You can see the blue ones at the top are sort of those kind of agreements. Trillium,
Trillium is our portion of that cooperative contract for the region. And I could get more specifics on who all that includes and what their dollar amounts are versus ours, but it has been 75,000 since I got here. And they bill us quarterly for that.
and the rest of them, the ones in gray, sort of represent. I talked about this in the meeting before, but there's a system where they apply through a form, comes to me, they detail, they send in financial information, what they're going to use the money for, and I believe I provided that to you guys in a folder format, all of the responses, but they sort of request, and we, as a budget team, go through and determine the validity of that request and where the funding would go towards. The yellow at the very bottom are the new requests that I received this year. This sheet was sent to you guys' email and it wasn't printed out. But again, individually we can go through this. The blue is the ones that were.
I think some of them that may just jump out at us right now as like we're on board with. I know Wilmington Business Development, that's a check for me that you can go ahead and just do.
Yep.
That's very good return on investment there, I think, the 250.
And as
Y'all good with
Commissioner,
that?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, I'm saying here. As Commissioner George stated a couple weeks ago, can we say why we're only giving $5,000 to share the table, but receiving a request from the Parks Foundation for $20,000?
It is strictly because that's what they requested.
Okay.
And-
100% of the requests.
Not necessarily, for instance, the Bergall Parks Foundation request we have not included.
Yeah, I've scratched through that one.
And I think the 5,000 was chosen because, if I remember some of our budget conversations, I wasn't leading those discussions, but as a sort of as a baseline to those community-related organizations, a lot of them we chose 5,000. If they requested more, we moved it to 5,000. And again, that's not the case for some of them because some of them requested less than 5,000, and we just
How about
included that.
Really hurt us to give another $1,000 for 6,000, they requested 5.
Oh, they requested 6. Did they oh, yeah.
Can we add that?
Yeah, and that was they requested 6,000, and like I said, the community-based organizations, kind of one that had in the same realm of services offered, a lot of them we just did 5,000 across the board. You can see that with Pender Alliance, Pender County Christian Services, Pender County Long-Term Recovery Group, and Share the Table.
In the past, there's not been a lot of rhyme or reason, to be honest.
Well, I'm in
It was
favor of the
mostly
additional
based-
$1,000 for them because Willard's getting ready to be busy up there with the new housing project and stuff going on. They probably need some help.
Check them out.
What's the that long-term recovery group? The 5,000. Why can't some of the opioid settlement funds be diverted to help them? Because we have to use it for certain things, right?
Sure, they would have to apply, so there's an application process for opioid funds.
Okay.
They would have to apply, and the opioid committee would have to be able to fit them into one of their criteria.
Well, let's work with them and see.
The long-term recovery group, I don't think is like addiction related, it's more
It's
hurricane related.
natural
Oh.
disaster recovery
Okay.
related.
I
yes,
thought
sir.
it was like
Yeah.
addiction stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Home repairs.
Yeah, it's a lot of help with
So they have never
contracting of-
they've never asked for any help.
Not
over these
before,
storms and the years and stuff?
not before this year, no, sir. Not as part of the annual budget process.
Hmm.
What's, Ms. Blue, I know we're all over the place tonight. What's this, United Way of the Cape Fear? What are they doing?
That is a branch of the National United Way organization, as far as I'm aware.
I'd be in favor of cutting that off. I don't know about the other board members.
Okay.
I've never known anyone in Pender County to get help from the United Way.
I have to agree.
I did a survey on it.
I have to agree with that.
Good with me?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't,
So-
I've never supported them, so.
I thought the Cape Fear Community College thing,
Yeah.
their roof repair got cut.
It's in.
Is it back in? The 1.4 million?
It's not.
It is not.
So the 708 is just we have to, the remainder of that was to redo the roof on Bergdale campus.
We had asked them to give us the number removing the roof. Yes, sir. So that's what the 708
Yeah.
is.
Does that only have to
I
cost,
don't know
Commissioner
if
George?
we asked them or if we told them we weren't gonna do it because the president told me he was told that by the former county manager that we weren't gonna do it because we didn't have the money. But I do know that they have roof issues over there because I walked in there and,
Sure.
and then Dr. Breedlove mentioned it the other night.
What I would suggest, is that they come separately from our annual budget process and make a capital request. Because otherwise, it's tying up annual tax
Well,
revenue
all
for.
that capital, all the Cape Fear money is capital, because that's for the maintenance of their facilities, that's 708. That's all they get from us.
Yes, for capital repairs, yes, but it's typically the same annually. Whereas the major capital improvements, like they asked to repair the parking lots a few years ago. And I think we did that out of capital versus the annual
And
budget.
a $700,000 one-time expense is more difficult to include in an annual budget than a request outside of budget.
Would they explain
Tom.
that when,
I have no idea, I didn't speak to them personally. We were just told that it was not included.
Who owns the building? Do we own it or does Cape Fear own it? The county owns it, okay.
Yes.
We own, got that over here?
Yes.
How about Surf City?
yes, I think.
I've gone to the community college.
According to what I've been told by the facilities people, that they become, it's kinda like the schools, they become part of the county property.
For operation. I think it's under ownership, right?
Right, now, I know they own this one, the county manager, I can't speak, I know that
Yeah, we got a 4-county loan for this building over here.
they're breaking ground on the Surf City addition June 2nd, so, and that's being paid for by state, grant funds or whatever, so, pass-through fund or something like that. But we're responsible for the operation and maintenance of it.
I would ask if we could take, I don't know how Commissioner George feels about this, 'cause I know you serve on that board. I would ask if we could take some of that money and put toward our own schools, for some of the maintenance repairs. And I don't know how that's gonna work out with the school's budget, but, going forward, I would ask too, when we go to allocate the school's budget, to earmark money for maintenance specifically, because some of these schools are in complete shambles.
And I agree with that, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna speak to that.
Okay.
Because we've been stuck at $2.9 million for capital improvements since they had 11 schools in the district. They now have 19. Right? And it's been $2.9 million. There's no way they'll ever catch up or get ahead or take care of the schools at $2.9 million every
Is
year.
that why we had the school bond?
No, it's not.
No, maintenance wasn't even on the, on any of the activities that I know
The
of.
school bond was just to build that new school.
Supposed to do the middle school cafeteria with the school bond. Said they were.
If there's any leftovers. If there's, yes, that was part of that, yes. But have you been to Pender High?
Yeah, I heard Pender High's in a
It's
mess.
terrible.
It's in a mess right now.
I mean, it's terrible. It's an embarrassment.
No, I know.
I think you can, if everybody's in agreement, I think Topsail and Surf City tonight, I think they're good. Cause that's what
Okay.
we normally give them each year, right?
It
Yeah.
has been for the last several, yes.
Is that, y'all okay with that?
Are we still an outside agency?
I'm just trying to knock
Yeah,
some
they're,
out.
they're on there.
How about some of the Chamber of Commerce's? What, is that on there? I didn't see it on there.
Yeah,
Yes,
Greater
there's
It is.
Greater Topsail Chamber,
$3,000.
We just do Greater Topsail.
That's the only one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Since the other departments went away, can we not give our chambers, like Burdall Chamber, Thompson Chamber, their representative as well?
Mm-hmm. But it's. Share the table. Y'all good with share the table, or,
Yeah,
I know it's a great organization, but are you good with just the 5, or do you want? Cause they asked for 15.
I'm good with sharing table.
Okay.
I know they do a lot I know Pender Adult Services does a lot for taking meals.
They do.
Older people.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't come. Usually West usually come every year. Maybe that's changed. I'm surprised they didn't come just about every request. Maybe this is just a standard. Maybe since things have changed when I left, it's just a standard. Automatically get it.
so Pender Adult Services, most of that
That's
is
too much
grant,
stuff.
it's our local match to their grant funding from DOT.
Okay.
There is, there's 2 lines, the top one,
No, it's not.
they're added together, aren't they?
One of them is a 700,000 grant. That's basically it.
Yes, and so then this 384 is our portion of their operating. Basically our local match to their operating.
And,
Did I require match?
It is for them to operate, yes, sir.
the, Pender Soil and Water Conservation District, I'm good with that. If everybody's okay with that, I'm good with that one. That goes toward helping the beaver and the
Okay.
outflows into ditches and canals. Okay. Pender County Museum, $9,300.
Mm. Where is the Pender County Museum?
Yeah, where is that at?
It's
That on Smith Street?
It's over behind the Family Dollar, by the old railroad.
Oh,
It's to the I don't know the night.
I think I know what you're talking about.
It's a little house.
You know where you go across,
Is that one?
from Piggly Wiggly, you can go
Yeah.
across West
Mhm.
Street and go down, it's right on the, and make a.
Take a left,
it's
it's on the right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. George.
No, I said, I just don't know street names. I know where it's at, I just don't know what street it's on.
I think that was the first brick house in Pender County. I'm certainly for, supporting the west side initiative, just like the east side. But I do think it means something if our beaches can drive on the ass and justify the request tonight, is that it's something to me that folk can request dollars without even coming for the governing body to justify the
Yeah.
request. That's, it's a little bit concerning to me.
They've never been asked to in the past. Doesn't mean they
They did when I
can't.
was here. They did, they had to come.
Sure.
And that would be appropriate. I mean, I think if you're asking for tax dollars, I think you should be able to come and explain to the folks, why you would want them to help fund something.
So they provide a form that explains that, but I understand your
Sure.
interest in them showing up. We can definitely work that into the process.
I'm just saying going forward next year, because.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
We cut Southeast Economic Development Commission some years ago, and I see where it's been added back. Why does the value of return for Pender County to Boston's organization?
Well, I sit on that board, and some of their meetings, they're actively writing grants and helping municipalities and governments attain grant money.
Pam says, I mean, how many have we got back in Pender County?
Oh, I have
I
no
used to be
clue.
on that board.
Yeah.
We actually cut that number before, so it's been added back.
I'm
sure there's a
good
reason
with the
why
board's
y'all
wishes.
vet these organizations and vet why they return the value back to Pender County.
We're members of both the Southeast Economic Development Commission and the Southeast Regional Economic Development
I know with members of it, I'm asking how we get return to value that we get back in Pender County. For example, if they do regional grants, how many grants are they writing directly for Pender County?
Sure, I do not know the answer.
So
to
there
that.
was a reason we cut the funds years ago.
Sure, I understand.
So the Pender County Museum wants their money for a 16 by 20 pole barn to house
Slippery roof, concrete pad.
agricultural exhibits, past, life, present, and present.
Mm-hmm. What does the Cape Fear River program do? It
My
doesn't even
understanding
have-
is it's a program through UNCW that monitors and does a lot of research on I think the quality of water and the levels of the river. They do a lot of with the river gauges and.
that are in Fayetteville and Bladen County, yeah.
We have one river gauge in Pender County.
Do we?
We have two, yes. One on each river, right?
Black River, Big River.
Yeah. But when Bladen's level's high, guess what our level is? It's high.
Sure.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
But yeah, I'm just asking.
Sure.
What was that one? Keep it out.
Cape Fear River program, they don't even have a definition or an info on the request block. And it's just been $4,000 a year every year. And I don't have a problem with the new asks this year, maybe tabling those, while we're sharpening our pencils, looking at salaries and employees. I don't have a problem with that.
Ms. Blue, do you have any suggestions on things you would like for us to look more into? You're the finance officer, well, interim county manager, but formerly,
Both right now.
right?
All the hats, right? I think these are all good questions. I think a lot of these outside agencies are used to asking for the same amount every year for whatever contribution they provide to Pender County, but I think the best thing would be to figure out what that contribution looks like, and how we allocate those dollars. And I'm happy to do that. I won't pretend like in the last couple of weeks I've had the time to do all of that for all of these. But I do know a little bit about each of them, enough to figure out what that looks like for the citizens and whether the tax dollars are in the right place, especially for these things. The other thing
I just have one right quick,
sure,
Chair. One of the ones that, the new request, I would like to keep if we could, just to make it,
Okay.
level playing field, is Pender County Christian Services. Since we have shared the table, moves, other,
Fruits and vegetables. Okay, I don't have a problem with
they
that.
do the food bank for this side, don't they?
Okay.
do.
Mm-hmm. They do, Sarah's gonna do a good
If
job.
we just move it out of,
Yeah, that's fine. We
And
put it in
they're
another
working on
column.
a number of projects, those folks are, with reusing that old school out in Pinnerly, and having some resources there for people to kind of all be able to come to one place. I do know that much. They did actually come and speak with us before they submitted their request, so, and we certainly appreciate that.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think that was all of our questions. And we will get everything squared up and
Okay.
balanced and come back to you and let you know where we are.
How about over here on the salaries, are we finished with that one? I don't know why the chief strategy and what's that officer, we're moving somebody around the community, I don't even know who. This, the position is chief strategy and engagement officer, did I move it from us?
Yes, that is a position, it's a reclassification from what I think was intended to be a much more administrative position and is not really administrative at all. They're doing a lot of planned project work, and coordinating with outside agencies.
Why don't we wait till the new manager come in and make him make that recommendation, him or her, make that recommendation? But they might wanna evaluate the positions in their office and see what is relevant.
That would be up to you all.
That would be my pleasure, but of course I yield to the pleasure of the board. That's my commissioner recommendation.
I will say, and I don't, not to point anybody out, but that would be Sarah's position.
See, and that's not relevant, I don't even know who position it is.
Well, my point is
See, it
just
takes
that,
my discussion away from it, and from my HR perspective, it's like not valid at that point, I didn't wanna know who it was.
well, my point is just that she's doing a lot of these plans that we would normally have paid a contractor for, that we didn't pay a contractor for. And so it's been a lot of work that doesn't fit in the job description, I
So
guess.
is it temporary duties or is it sustainable for long term?
Both. The plans initially are the work, but somebody's got to maintain them and make sure that things are implemented and moving forward.
Any other comments?
Keep it, you know? When your calls come in, it looks like it's more issues in the position, so keep it and move on then.
Let me look, my comment on the number 20.
Yes.
And number 3 is a substantial increase too. I would think, I would ask you just to look at that too. And
Yeah, I believe that kind of goes in the same category of administrative assistant insinuates a lot of clerical work.
gotcha.
And that's not what it turns out that job is doing. And so that's what the reclass is for.
Okay.
Does it, I mean, again, it's up to you all, but that's what the request is for, because it's, the job description is administrative and that's not what they're doing.
$17,000 increase.
Director
Good job.
Greg Jackson, he had requested a position
coordinator.
initially, and this was our attempt to keep him at 3 people in his office,
Mhm.
but to reclass his administrative person to an elections coordinator instead of giving him the new position and bringing him to 4 people, keeping it at 3, but reclassing to match with the work that person's doing in the office.
Okay. And 21, since we're looking at focusing on retention, recruitment, and keeping employees of the sheriff's office, and I totally support that, in the men and women who are boots on the ground, I think that position can maybe wait to a later time.
Sure.
And that'll help you with $70,000.
Sure, we had kind of discussed that one, and part of it was, I think a lot of the duties are falling on one person, and to split it up would make it more palatable, but I don't think that they'll have an issue. with
Well, if
that.
their
They
training,
understand.
if their training division only has 1 supervisor, they've got another issue with over 100 officers. That's unattainable. I mean, I hope they have some help, but I'm not sure.
We'll discuss it with them and make sure that it's
Okay.
not crippling or anything like that,
Yeah.
but we'll go that route.
So they'd asked for 8 deputies, is that correct?
They did.
Can we look at 4?
We can,
I thought that was already in there,
I did too.
the 8.
the 4 deputies.
No, sir, the 4 new deputies was not included
They
in
asked
this.
for 4
They
new
asked for
deputies,
8.
that's what,
They asked for 8.
you all asked, right, so that you all asked for, you all went in and adjusted the other salaries and so forth. What we were asking was for the 8 deputies and to bring up the minimum salary for those road deputies, is what the request was for them. Understand compression, understand salaries, understand where the other ones are at, but that's the request before us. We're not doing a mini salary set, but we're going in to do adjustables. We're just looking at what the request was. So that's what we're looking at this point.
How many jailers do they ask for?
10, I believe.
10 jailers?
10.
I think that's for next year, right? For new
Well, they asked for them this year, and we asked to move them next year.
Well, Well, certainly you remember our detention, I mean, we're building the building, so we got a plan for
Mhm.
jail, and be able to have support the detention officers. Me personally, I'd rather see this budget, this money go into law enforcement, especially those that live in rural areas and so forth. You know, you depend on law enforcement to respond quickly out in those areas and so forth, versus just fat and administrative salaries.
Correct.
How long would it take to train jail?
Oh, I don't know the FTO schedule, so what is, like 8 weeks or something, and don't quote me on that.
How long
I
would
think
it take
sh-
for a
I
jail to
think-
be proficient at their job?
Well, they actually have to do some on the job, and they actually have to go to Salemburg or Samarkand to be detention officer certified by the state. They have to go to school.
So it's about a year long.
It's probably at least a year, I would think. But if we start on next budget adding that for the new jail, I think, and we may can look at something, bringing them on a few months ahead.
We can certainly
Yeah, I think that's what
explore
we
that.
mentioned.
That's what we had
That way they
started
can
with.
start their training.
That's what we had started with, but it basically only gave you like a couple months at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And
What-
you're correct, it does take a while to train them. I believe she said it was a 6-week training, but then the shadowing process is more like 6 months to a year.
And there's a certain amount of time they have to have their certification for
Yes,
detention officer.
that's correct. Some of the reason that we made some of these cutbacks on the new position requests is because there were significant vacancies currently.
Well, I would, yeah, but I would, with the relook at all these, the pay ranges for the boots on the ground folks,
Mhm.
I would ask you to look at least, like Commissioner George said, at least 4 positions maybe for him.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
All right.
Also, I think as one board member, we need to consider when we absorb or merge or transition over from Pender EMS Fire, we don't need to forget about HR, and we don't need to forget about some of them other positions. I don't see that on here, and that's why I'm asking, has any of that been thought out, or?
Oh, I'm sure
Figured
it's
in.
been spoken of, because they're gonna require, if we get 200 more employees, these HR, finance, people are gonna have to come over with them and
Yeah.
assist.
Correct, that has not been figured in this because it's figured in Penry West Fire's budget
Yeah.
currently.
Okay.
So once they were to make that transition, it would be put in next year's budget.
But that position is saved,
Correct.
because we don't wanna look at
So how,
cutting any positions.
so how different is HR's policies and procedures at Pender EMS and Fire versus the government's? I mean, what all
In
certification?
some ways, it's very different, and in others, it's very similar. I know that's not a very great answer, but it's true. There are things that they do with like fluctuating work week that we can't do, but we are reaching out to the Department of Labor. We already have, Pam and Angela have already reached out to the Department of Labor to figure out the options that are as close as we can get or as palatable as we can that other places are already doing.
Mhm.
Because we're not the first people to do it, and we won't be the last.
Okay.
So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we are reaching out to make sure that what we do from the get-go is what they recommend, so that we don't have any issue with that going forward.
Okay.
Good deal.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to rip any Band-Aids off or
Sure.
have any surprises. I just
No,
want to make
that's
sure we
good.
get,
Very good
take care of
question.
all of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And I would be okay with the 4 employees, jailers too. And can you also tell me again, I know you've said it before, when the new jail is supposed to open?
November 2026, I think.
Yes. The fall of
Mhm.
26. I had November, October-ish, October, November.
Something comes on in May, and then something comes on for whatever reason there too. They're all coming in 26. The school was originally coming in 26, now it's 27, but 26 was
That's right.
supposedly gonna be.
The library actually hasn't been bid for construction just yet, but it will,
It'll be 27, I'm sure.
Is that
It'll
gonna be a
take
hard
year
bid?
to build it.
right.
Is that a design build or a hard bid?
It's a hard bid, it's
Ooh.
design bid though. Because we're cash
It'll be-
flowing that
it'll
one.
take a year more, 15 months. next?
That was all of my questions.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing that extra work and bringing that back where we could button that up and help you with
We
your
will
questions.
Do the best we can.
Yeah, and we'll
How's
come
your
back
stomach?
to,
Stomach okay, Jacob?
We'll see. Math is hard,
It's okay.
and it does not lie, but
No, it's,
we'll do the best we can.
yes.
Add it to the list and bring it up.
As far as we're concerned, that is all we have for budget meetings. Like I said, we will have to come back with
with the final
with a final
hurrah.
draft, yes. And so, for those who don't know, or maybe the public who may be listening, we have to provide a balanced budget for public inspection for 10 days prior to the meeting that the budget is scheduled to be approved at. Typically, that's been the first meeting in June. With some of these kind of major changes late in the game, we will see if we can do the first meeting or if we need to move it to the second meeting, but either would be perfectly fine. And we will let you know, and we will have, public notices. The public hearing will be at the same time.
Mhm.
And, if we have any other questions or feedback in the meantime,
Is,
let us know, so as soon as possible, the sooner the better, so that we can make sure it's incorporated.
Once we vote on the projected budget for next year, is that one vote or two votes, Trey? We good? Just one vote? I know some municipalities do two votes or think.
Well, and sometimes things get pulled out because of commissioners having positions with boards or things like that.
Okay,
That's right.
So that sometimes it will be, there'll be multiple votes, it'll be all one budget it may have, but we may pull certain parts
I
out
got you.
of
All
it
right.
to accommodate
That's right.
the conflict issues that
Okay.
sometimes come up.
Sounds good. Anything else?
Don't think so.
Well, anything
not
from,
for now.
anything from any of the commissioners? All right. Thank you much.
Thank you for your
very
time.
much.